I'm Michael Bungay-Stania. This is Change Signal, the podcast where we cut through the blather, the BS, and the noise to find the good stuff that works in change. If you're a transformational leader seeking modern change mastery, this will be your favorite podcast. Here's a provocative start for you.
If you look at what keywords people would associate with change, these are not positive things, right? This is anguish, difficulty. I no longer believe that to be true.
That's Loran Nordgren, a professor of behavioural theory at Northwestern University's Kellogg School of Management. Loran's the co-author of The Human Element, Overcoming the Resistance That Awaits New Ideas. And resistance, well, we know resistance when it comes to change. So I'm a fan of this book, even with its focus primarily being on bringing new ideas and innovations to the world. I do think there's a deep wisdom for us in how we bring change to our organization. So this conversation with Loran is about how urgency and the burning platform might be overrated. And there's a deep dive into exactly what we mean by resistance. Now, Loran and I have actually talked before on the 2 Pages with MBS podcast, so it's a delight to be back in conversation. Hey, Loran, welcome.
Michael, it's great to be back. Delighted to be here.
So let me start with a bold question. What do you know about change and resistance now that you might not have known 5 years ago?
One thing I believe I know about change, so I'm going to change that. One thing I believe I know about change now is that many of the assumptions we have around it, one being, maybe the central one being, is that it is very hard. I don't mean to suggest that all change is easy, but my sense is we have come to believe that change is difficult because we have the wrong intuitions about the nature of change. And many of the intuitions we follow, it's not just that they are ineffective, they actually amplify the problem.
Right. So let's start with the intuitions that we've got that amplify the problem. What are they?
There are many. I think one problematic intuition is that we believe that the way you create change is by heightening the appeal, the importance, the urgency of the idea itself. Like if you were to go look at leaders in an organization, and there's something that they want, there's a way in which they want their employees to be different. Maybe they want them to speed up work, innovate more, hit deadlines, reduce errors, whatever change they seek. If you really look at what they're doing, they're saying this is urgent, this is necessary, this is top priority.
Right.
And this is this belief, if I make the thing itself attractive enough, then I will get people to say yes.
So like louder, brighter, shinier. Okay, It's still not working. Louder, brighter, shinier. And that doesn't typically get people on board. It creates resistance of some sort?
Well, I think there are 2 problems with that approach. And so just, I have some very loose language around this, and I refer to that strategy as what I would call using fuel. Like you're putting your foot on the gas.
Right.
And one, it's not that fuel is bad. I mean, it's necessary. If your idea doesn't have value, it's going to die, particularly for important ideas, for breakthrough ideas, necessary, the kinds of change the world needs to see, whether that's on some grand scale or with an organization. Most of these ideas are self-evidently good. When a leader talks about the importance of increasing innovation or greater diversity initiatives or empowering people, there is no one in the room saying, I think innovation is a bad idea.
Right.
The issue isn't lack of appeal, lack of fuel in my terms. The issue is that when a good idea fails to thrive, there are these psychological barriers or frictions that hold those ideas back.
Yeah.
And when leaders sense the resistance, their approach, because it's the one tool they have, is to just hit the gas more. But this is akin to having the handbrake on in the car, right? More gas is not moving us forward. And if anything, is just, if we continue to apply it, is just causing more damage to the system, is stressing the system.
what I love about this is you're moving the shift away from the fuel to the resistance. And it's like, what are the things that we need to design into that allow us to cut a path through the resistance that will inevitably be there?
Yeah. I mean, at a very high level, the question I like to pose is, let's just assume for a second that the ideals, our idea, our product, our initiative, whatever it is going to struggle, but not because people don't believe in the idea itself. But let's assume that there are things that are holding this idea back.
Yeah.
What would those things be? And like the physical world, friction is like gravity, like wind resistance. I mean, these are fundamental forces that the mind does not readily see.
Yeah.
And there are these powerful but unseen forces that reside in your next big breakthrough idea. And the fundamental challenge isn't to overcome those through force. It's by having empathy into the nature of those psychological frictions and then disarming them. So in essence, I feel like I'm in the business of making ideas aerodynamic. Like, how can you remove the drag that's holding them down?
That's a great metaphor. You talk about 4 specific types of frictions. Can you take us through what those are?
I think it's helpful to think about like the fundamental anatomy or architecture of an idea itself. And so I would say any new product, new initiative has 4 dimensions in each of corresponding friction. And so the 4 questions I would ask are, number 1, is the idea, is your change, is it radical change? Is it big change? Or is it a slight tweak?
Right.
Bigger the change, the greater the resistance. We call that inertia. Unfortunately for us as innovators, the human mind favors what it knows. And what it means is that the bigger the change, the greater the resistance, but that resistance is not about the value, the perceived value of the idea itself. That resistance is fundamentally about its unfamiliarity. So one way people try and create attraction around their idea is to talk about how cutting edge, bleeding edge, transformative. This is a revolution. There is nothing like this that has ever come before.
Yeah. So let me make this scary and unknown for you.
Yes. That's inherently ambivalent. And so if you see it from that perspective, there are different sorts of solutions. And the ideal one is one in which that does not water down one's excitement for the idea, right? Not to compromise the value of the idea. But in essence, how do we make breakthrough things feel familiar in some way or another?
Right. I had a boss in the innovation days. He was a bit nuts, but he was brilliant in some ways. And he used to say, you have to find the right balance between madness and measure. That was his language. If it's too mad, people are like, that's just weird, and I don't want that. If it's too familiar, people are like, well, what's the point? It's just, why don't we just keep it as it is?
Yeah.
So just trying to find that balance point between how is there a bridge into something new, but how is that bridge connected to familiarity?
Yes.
Allows me to reduce the friction of inertia, which is kind of the what shows up when you've got this more radical degree of change.
Yeah, and this is the fun part, right? Here's where the creativity comes in, and there are many really interesting solutions. Some are as simple as framing. For example, one approach I've found effective, again, when we are talking about big change. One recommendation I occasionally offer is for people to tell an evolution rather than a revolution story.
Got it.
So a revolution story is, I have something that is going to change the world, and there's nothing like it that has ever come before. And a lot of innovators really want to tell that story.
Right.
For me, an evolution story is there is this timeless problem. And we first began to solve it. There was our first step forward. In the 1950s or whatever is when we first began to solve this problem. Then was the 2.0 solution to this, which was a step forward. Those were advances, but were all flawed.
I've been thinking about what Loran said here, particularly with my growing awareness these days that change is less about a distinct project and more just ever-present and coming in waves. So rather than fighting that, I think there might be this opportunity to frame what's happening as ongoing evolution rather than, a radical reboot of something. And how we frame things really matters.
This brings us to the next step. And when you're telling an evolution story rather than a revolution story, notice you're not diminishing the excitement, the value. This is still the latest and greatest, but the story makes clear that this is built on the back of something, right? This is built on, it's in a lineage. It's the next chapter.
Right, there's heritage.
There's heritage. And that's exciting and comfortable. It's a lot less scary than wild and out of the box.
Yeah. The next of the kind of decisions you're making around change and frameworks around change is like, what's the cost of actually making this happen? Can you say more about what that is and what friction does that engender?
Yeah. So the way I would think about this is, number one is, are we talking big change, inertia? Yeah. The second dimension, all change carries implementation cost.
Right.
And I would argue the human mind is hypersensitive, that we are hardwired to be hypersensitive to three things, one of them being effort expenditure.
Right.
I mean, our minds are constantly doing an effort calculus. And what I think is really interesting is what I've observed is that in a lot of cases, effort expenditure can be the most important factor in determining whether or not an essential idea is going to succeed or die. Yet it is something we just do not talk about in the professional domain. Right. Like when a leader is applying fuel, when they're talking about, let's take innovation, and they're talking about how vital we need to innovate more. We can't rest on our laurels. We need to keep going for better.
Right.
No one will ever say that sounds like a lot of work, but is absolutely a consideration. And I think this concept of effort becomes particularly important when we recognize that there's an obvious dimension of effort, which is like how many steps, physical, mental exertion.
Yeah.
But for me, within organizations particularly, the really important dimension of effort is ambiguity. It's like ambiguity equals effort, because ambiguity means trial and error. It means solving the maze. Yeah. And I would argue a lot of things that for leaders look like active resistance, rejection of the proposal itself is really just ambiguity.
Got it.
People don't know what first step to take, and therefore they resist the idea. So a big consideration for me is for people to do what you want them to do, for people to engage in change.
Yeah.
What are all the steps needed?
Yeah.
Then once we map those steps, particularly the seemingly trivial ones, those are, in my experience, the most important. Can we just remove a few?
Right.
And if we can shift that effort calculus, we can often have a dramatic impact. To illustrate with an example outside of my own work, so this was a story told to me, I'll pass along, the kind of social media tech conference, South by Southwest. Mm-hmm. They want what everybody wants in some form. Like they want to grow attendance, grow momentum, visibility, stature. And what they realized, I think like a lot of compelling things, you don't have to convince people to go, right? There's I play a lot with this concept of what I would call like latent demand. Like good ideas have demand. We just need to remove the things that are holding it back, right? We just need to unlock it. And so what they realize is there's an army of people who want to attend South by Southwest but never do. The reason being is because they need to justify this to their boss.
Right.
They don't want this to count as vacation days. They want this to be a work event.
Paid for by the organization.
Yes.
It's a work day. And I'm also in Austin having a cool time.
Yes.
Yeah.
So what someone from that organization shared is they created templates.
Yeah.
Like 4 email templates and put it on the website. Here's a copy paste email you can send to your boss that we have A/B tested. Here are some ways to help you have that conversation with your boss.
That's brilliant.
And my understanding is that's been a lot more effective than, glitzy videos and star power and all of those stuff. Those are things already understood about the convention, but just understanding what is it that's holding people back in that moment.
If you do want to connect with Loran, I hope you do, go to loranNordgren.com. That's LoranNordgren.com. And you can find some tools and a friction map, a way of mapping friction, that he and his colleague David have put together at another website, which is aerocept.com. That's AEROCEPT.com. What's the third challenge people are up against, and what's the friction that it unlocks?
Yeah, so the third dimension of any idea is really around the reactions, the emotions the idea itself is going to produce, which obviously we want our ideas to produce happiness, excitement, positive feelings. Yeah, elation, safety. But even those that succeed can inadvertently trigger unintended negative reactions and emotions. We call this emotional friction.
Yeah.
And emotional friction can be a really powerful drag on innovation. So in essence, what we're trying to think about is it's the insight that people can be both simultaneously excited and anxious about an idea.
That's so good.
And the example of this that I love is guitar sales. So if you look at the music instrument industry, it's not doing great. Guitar Center, I believe, filed for bankruptcy. Now, that's kind of wild because with each new generation, there are an army of kids who would like nothing more in the world than to be a rock star.
Right.
Like a guitar sells itself.
Right. You're like, this is the promise of great things to come.
Yeah. But there's a bunch of people who never fulfill the dream of playing the guitar.
Yeah.
Not because they're not convinced, they're fully convinced, but because there is what I would call first step anxiety. There's this fear of the uninitiated, this sense of walking into a guitar store for the first time is anxious. And it's anxious particularly because of who guitar stores employ. They employ quasi-professional musicians.
Right, exactly.
And who do those people want to talk to? They do not want to talk to newbies. They want to talk to other really accomplished musicians. I mean, there's almost a culture there where you walk in and you try and prove your bona fides, your worth.
Yeah.
So my amazing colleague, David, who's co-author on this book, we did some mystery shopping where we'd call up guitar stores. We would say, I've never picked up a guitar, but it has always been a dream, and I'm like to come in. The most common response we would get to that is, what kind of guitar do you want?
Right. You're like, how would I even know? It's like, now you've scared me, because now you just reminded me how ignorant I am.
You put your finger on the thing I was most anxious about, right? And notice in the employee, that seems like a reasonable question because they don't have the right perspective on this.
Right.
Right? They're asking a functional question where really the challenge is, how do I reduce the anxiety around that first step?
Yeah.
And that's, to me, kind of the heart of a lot of emotional friction. But I think at its core, it is often as simple as just asking about hesitation.
Right.
So I think of this approach as often like the opposite of our kind of sales archetype. And in sales, there's this like objection handling, like I'm selling something to you. And if you bring up an objection, here's how I am going to disarm it. Here's how I'm going to remove it. What we're suggesting is not defeating, but rather understanding those objections.
So if I've rung you up as a guitar person going, hey, look, it's always been a dream of mine to play the guitar. I've never picked up a guitar in my life. what rather than going, what guitar do you want? What do you ask? What are you asking me instead?
Well, first, if you in that moment now realize you're dealing with a novice, number one, the first thing I would do is validate their background. You say,
Right.
That's so exciting. You are my favorite kind of customer to work with.
Yeah, this is going to unlock an amazing world for you. It's so cool that you're taking this step.
This is the most exciting person for me to work with.
Yeah.
Right? Because it's the first step on what's going to be an amazing journey.
Yeah.
Then once they get their foot in the door, I would assume that there are still concerns and anxieties. I would be eager to ask about them. What are you concerned about? What are you anxious about? For me, in every context, this has been the idea that's helped me so often.
Yeah.
I think an instinct, so we're talking about these bad intuitions. I think another is that putting attention on a potential anxiety like amplifies it or manifests it.
Yeah.
I would argue it's the very opposite. That anxiety is there whether we address it or not, but only by asking about it can we then disarm it.
I'm thinking of just how often I've been in a room with somebody tub thumping the positives of the change, trying to jazz hands and tap dance their way through the anxieties that are there in the room with them, because their instinct is to avoid it. But to disarm requires you to engage. And to engage, I think, requires you to sit with your own anxiety about their anxiety. I mean, I get this at a guitar selling level, but at an organizational level, if I'm a change person, I'm like, we're needing to reboot some part of the organization. We're doing a restructure.
Yeah.
And people are like, but what's going to happen to me? This is what I'm nervous around this. Mm-hmm. Can you give me some language or a framework there? I might just find a way of starting to what you're doing is reducing the level of threat.
Yeah, for me, this is about its approach is similar to what you would do in the guitar context, which is to proactively seek out what are the concerns that and these are concerns that are likely not about the idea itself. These are concerns about history. They're concerns about context. I encountered this recently where a leader was proposing a new internal change initiative. People did not like it. The leader thinks, people around here, like, what are you going to do? People around here, because this is clearly a good idea. And it's almost like in the leader's mind, it's like an intelligence test for her. Like, if you don't like this idea, you're dumb or cynical or something bad.
Yeah.
But when you just talk to a few people, there were a few of these kind of emotional frictions. So you're looking for like the stories that keep organically emerging. But one was that this leader came in a year prior, did not understand the history.
Yeah.
Leadership before, like this leader wanted a group that was, had more of a client focus, be more like high touch customer client focused.
Yeah.
That is who they had been for historically. The leader before said, you guys need to stop doing all of this high touch stuff because it's killing our like cost control, all of this. So they did this like hard pivot from who they've been to accommodate this. Now someone new is coming in saying, you guys need to be this.
Yeah.
A lot of this is like symbolic. It's the meaning. And my guess is if part of the resistance here is that the leader isn't acknowledging like the back and forth, the whiplash that they have been asked to sort of accept. And if there were an acknowledgement to say, now look, here's the vision. Now I want to make clear that, some of you are very likely and reasonably thinking,
what the hell? Didn't we just go from B to A and now we're going to have to go from A to B again?
Yes.
Right.
And that would disarm a lot of that kind of cynical resistance, but it's about understanding what that is. And so for me, it's about asking, what are your concerns? What are other people's concerns?
Yeah.
And being willing to ask a few times. And for me, like the go-to would be so what might your concerns be?
Yeah.
And then whatever they say, hear that and then say, it sounds like there's more to that.
Yeah. I mean, well, in the Coaching Habit book, the question I say is the best coaching question in the world is, and what else? Because their first answer is never their only answer, and it's rarely their best answer.
Yeah.
And if I might build on what you're saying, Loran, I might also go, right, I think I understand your concern. If you were coaching me on how I can address that concern, what would your thoughts be? I mean, how would you guide me around how to make this feel better and safer for all of you?
Mm-hmm.
And again, you don't have to take that advice. You don't have to take that guidance. But how helpful for people to go, if you could just do this,
Mm-hmm.
it would make most of this go away. You're like, all right, that's a lot easier than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I love that approach. And it's a nice segue to this fourth dimension, which is often the most important in organizations, which the fourth dimension of any idea is the relationship between the innovator and the audience. Right. And here the key question is, does the audience feel as though they are being pressured, mandated to change, or do they feel as though they've freely embraced the idea? The greater the pressure, the greater the resistance, and we call that reactance.
Yeah.
And, this is this notion. So in terms of, bad change intuitions, the other would be that the direct, fast path, that's rarely going to be the right path. And it is our human nature, right? And it's linked back to our intrinsic need for autonomy. When we mandate change, fundamentally what people are experiencing is a denial of autonomy.
Right.
And so they begin to actively attempt to defeat the change. And to the leader, it looks like a rejection of the idea itself. To the audience, it's not about that, right? At some level, it's about, if I defeat your initiative, I reclaim the thing I intrinsically value.
I just want to have some control. I just want to make some choice. Yeah. When I think of autonomy, I'm often, and I think of that as kind of ongoing if I'm facilitating. It's like, how much choice can I give this audience? Because the more choice I give them, the more they're going to be here in the room for me. Because if they're feeling more autonomous, they're going to be with me in the room rather than arms crossed and resisting what's going on.
And I totally understand, nor would I recommend that when you think about how do we bring people in to disarm this kind of sense of pressure and the resistance that comes with it, if we try and bring everyone in to every step of the process, it's very quickly becomes unmanageable.
Yeah.
But giving people a sense of voice and agency, it doesn't mean that they have to be, functionally speaking, a decision maker at each stage of the journey.
Right.
And so, another tip I might leave people with is, when we're trying to invite people in, rather than just saying, so what do you think? You might say, which is generic advice seeking, which they could say, I hate this idea. Right now, we've made things worse.
Yeah. Yeah.
Instead, how would you approach this? Imagine you were in my shoes. As you know, I've been tasked to what are the first couple steps you would take? Like, we're giving them a very specific job, which is, how would you go about the process of implementation? What arguments do you think would be most successful and compelling? And it is, inviting people in is not a suggestion box, right? It can't be this passive act. But if people are feeling heard, even if we don't ultimately pursue that solution, it is the fundamental act that I've had an opportunity to shape this process that restores this feeling of agency in the process.
This conversation has really reminded me about what I think is one of the most profound challenges of leading change. We know we need to do change with people, not to people. We need to propagate agency in our organization. So we move people, from, an exhausted obedience through perhaps an enthusiastic compliance, but really to a bold responsibility where people know that they are a change agent in their own organization. And yet we can't just outsource it all. We need to provide guidelines and principles and a loose map, or at least a purpose and guardrails. There's this dance between holding control and creating agency. You, of course, have full agency to support this podcast in whatever way you want. I mean, a review is always very appreciated, but I'm most enjoying people posting on LinkedIn and tagging me about what they like about the pod. So thank you for spreading the word. If you know other transformational leaders like you who are seeking modern change mastery, do let them know about Change Signal. Thanks for doing the work. I'm glad you're here.